Hi everybody and welcome back to our channel. My name is Costa and together with my husband Armand, I love talking and sharing about self-development, spirituality, and easy living. Recently we've started posting more clips from our Viola calls. Viola is the wider perspective I tune into. When we do our channeling calls, I put away my judgments, thoughts, opinions, beliefs a little bit on the side for the time being, and people who are participating have an opportunity to ask the questions for anything that matters to them and get wonderful self-reflections and insights from the wider perspective, whether you call it the universe or higher self. Really, the conversation, the values that are coming through are awesome. Anyways, this week's clip that I will share with you is about something. Oh, I just love that I was reminded about it today. It was about thoughts being experienced and then thoughts being observed. There is a difference between the two, because in a lighter space of, like, when we are in a lighthearted space or in a meditative state and we observe the thought, it feels completely different than when we're actively thinking the thought as a thinking center that we are. So I just love how this clip is driving to that. The participant was asking about she wanted to she see the evidence of how things are working, cause and effect, and applying feeling good into her practice to receive and manifest what she wants, but there's this one thing that she doesn't. So anyways, Willie gives this wonderful insight, but this thoughts being observed and thought really stood out for me. So enjoy the clip now, and at the end I'm going to offer you a practical way that I got out of listening this clip, and something that I reminded myself I'm gonna go back to and use. So enjoy it, and I'll see you at the end. Bye.
I've heard was kind of, if something's not working or a manifestation or something in your life, to focus on the things that are working, to get really happy, and all the other stuff will just fly into your life. So I spent pretty much a lifetime just doing that and manifesting all this stuff. Then I kind of just had a breakdown because I never got the thing I really wanted. And then I actually started trying to get it, but I still don't have it. So, I guess there's a block there of sorts. So I guess my question is, I feel frustrated, like that teaching doesn't work when it comes to trauma or blocks or certain. So just any ways to ease, or any ideas about that?
Well, it's always easier to do it with things that are not of as much importance to you. In other words, you always have various desires, and you could have some of those that are a little bit bigger. In other words, it feels to you like there is a bigger stretch. And so you start with the ones that are not so big for you, and you see the evidence enough for you to continue trying, but not to continue trying to focus on the gap. In other words, not to focus on the gap of, this was easy because it was small, but it's not working for this because it's big. We say it's working for all of it. It does not matter how big or small it is, it's working. If you found the system a resonance of received thought put into the word, in other words, something that resonates and gives you resonance about the system, and you see the evidence of that system. In other words, you've received through the lens of that teacher that resonance to show you enough evidence for you to continue applying it. But the reason why you sometimes get discouraged is because you're focused on something rather big. And so what happens is, with the smaller desires, you do not notice because you have not spent so much time focusing on them. So you do not notice that it is not that you're moving your attention from one to another thought, but even if you are to move attention from one to another thought, you go through the process of unfocusing. We're gonna use the analogy we had with the bird. So let's say that you're consistently flying around and you're looking outwards, and then you dive in, but you dive in looking up towards the water and towards the sky. In other words, towards the line where you can get out. When you're looking from that perspective, well, now you dove in and now you can choose to which new direction you want to go and soar in the sky. And so then again, you have, when you want to shift the thought, so you're observing and choosing and you do not like what you're observing, you go down again in a process of unfocusing and you choose a different pathway to now exit the water and go to fly again. In other words, this is how this whole switching of the thoughts is happening. It's not that you go from one thought to another, from one thought to another. You always have the pathway of coming to the process of unfocusing and then imprinting through a different pathway to think that new thought. And so when you get to be in a perspective of unfocusing, in other words, to use the process of unfocusing to be in a wider perspective, you're able to start observing the thoughts and you're able to be aware of some of those pathways of how you're imprinting the thoughts. Whereas when you're imprinting the thought through the same pathway over and over and over again, you have the feeling of density. You have the feel that you're stuck because you did make a dent to that pathway, and more automatically than not, you go back to it, even though you pulled through the process of unfocusing, because every time a thought is switched, it's switched because it goes through the process of some kind of unfocusing. But because it's not that big of a deal to you that you're not aware of the gap, it's rather easy for you to be unfocused on that particular topic. Well, on those topics that you keep impressing on consistently, you do not trust it because it feels denser. It feels like you have less power on it. And we say whatever tool gets you to be in a process of steady, and by being in steady we mean by dispersing your thought altogether. In other words, the sharpness on a thought, that it's repetitive and then dense and consistent. It is not that you want to switch it to some lighter thought. You want to unfocus, so then you can choose a different pathway of a different lighter thought. And so it is not about you trying to pull with your force, with your physical force. This is how sometimes it feels to you. It feels like you're laboring. It feels like you're stuck, because as you are impressing on thought, and we did not say this before, you are then experiencing a physical part of that thought. Your thought is part of your physicality, and as a thinking center, you can think that thought. But when you are observing the thought from a wider perspective, through the tools of unfocusing, you are softer about it, and therefore you are in this wider perspective that it's even beyond the thought. Only when you're unfocused enough, when your flashlight of attention is dispersed enough, you can really observe the thought and choose which one to impress, which one to express by impressing your flashlight of attention in a specific direction. That part is at all times your choice, whether you're doing it automatically or deliberately. And that's why we always refer back to you to the process of softening up all thought when that dense part comes through. And with a little bit of practice of you coming to the wider perspective and then observing that thought that's been dense and repeated and giving you trouble, each time you do that, it will be something softer. The density will be less. You will be seeing less and less of that dent that you've been making, because you will be ironing it from your process of dispersing. In other words, you will be dispersed, and then your direction will be softer because of the process of dispersing. And with a little bit of time, this thought, this gap that you've created will be equally light as any thought that brought you that instant, easy manifestation, because the system is at all times the same. Okay, I heard it again once more, and the part that really sticks out again with me is that there is never the moment really where we shift from one thought to another. We try to shift from one thought to another, but we're always going, what's coming as a visual is, and Viola sometimes talks about it, is it's like you pull out the speaker from like cable from one and plug it into another. So like now there is this thought, and now you unplug, which means you get to that lighter state where you can observe the thought or choose kind of from the menu, and then plug it in and make the dent of that new one. I really love that reminder now, hearing it once more. So the exercise that I like sometimes to do is zooming in, zooming out. And so in a visualization, I'll close my eyes and I would think for a moment, if I was, for example, to observe, I don't know, the sign on a corner of the street, and then in my vision, I start pulling a little bit wider, and I like to choose the going higher, just like I really like that perspective. So I close my eyes and I imagine that I'm pulling away, like I'm zooming out to see not only that sign on the corner of the street, but I want to see all four corners of that street, like an intersection. But I still see that sign, and then I pull a little bit wider to see what is the building behind it, and then I pull a little bit wider, and then I see what are the variety of other things, and I'm like, okay, well, then I want to change it and shift and see what else I can find interesting. In the vision, it does not matter what it is, because the point of this exercise is that you can zoom out from wherever your thought is and then go back into this more neutral, wider perspective, and then shift it towards something else that you want to give attention. Give it a try. It's a wonderful thing that can practice your focus and really come in handy when you sometimes get stuck on a thought that doesn't feel so good. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this clip and this whole conversation. I love you, and I'll see you soon. Bye.